This isn't just a story about character and humility, it is a story about respect. This lesson happened at a gym when a black belt asked a black janitor to spar just to boost his ego and mock the janitor. This isn't just a story about ambition. It's about what happens when you judge people based on their appearance, profession, or position. Don't skip this one. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow, I've got something extra special for you. The gym smelled of sweat, polish, and something sharp, like bleach that had lingered too long. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, humming a constant, low note that seemed to scrape against the skin if you listened too closely. At the center of that harsh glow stood Charles Bill, tall, broad, and impossible to ignore. Every inch of him seemed to demand attention. His black belt gleamed, his stance radiated confidence bordering on arrogance, and the smirk that never left his face suggested he believed the world existed solely to affirm his superiority. He was the kind of man who didn't wait for respect, he claimed it, grabbed it, forced it out of anyone in his path. Around him, 6 students followed like satellites, their eyes fixed on his movements, half in admiration, half in apprehension. Charles turned slowly, scanning the gym like a predator deciding which prey was worth noticing. And that's when his gaze fell on William Washington. William was sweeping the floor in a corner, mop in hand, the motion fluid but unremarkable, almost invisible. 3 weeks on the job and unnoticed by most, except, apparently, by Charles. The black belt's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a smirk that promised mischief. Well, Charles said, his voice cutting through the gym's ambient hum. What do we have here? He stepped closer, deliberately loud, like a hammer striking iron. A janitor. Been here 3 weeks, and already thinks he belongs. You know, he paused, spreading his hands as if to bless the mop in William's grip, I like to give people a chance to show their limits. Let's have some fun. William kept his head down, pretending not to hear, his mop tracing a steady, monotonous pattern across the floor. He didn't respond, didn't even flinch. But his muscles, hidden beneath the faded uniform, tensed like dormant springs. Charles chuckled, loud and sharp, echoing off the walls. Afraid to fight? Or are you just as useless with your fists as you are with that mop? He stepped closer, eyes glinting with anticipation. Come on, janitor. I promise I won't hurt you, much. The students shuffled uneasily. One whispered, barely audible, this isn't necessary, but Charles ignored it, delighting in the imbalance, the power he wielded over someone so clearly beneath him in his eyes. And still, William said nothing. His silence was not submission, it was calculation, restraint. Beneath the quiet surface, something stirred, a memory of another life, another time, when the world had not been so dismissive, and when he had been feared and revered in equal measure. But that was long ago, buried beneath years of regret, shame, and a promise to stay out of the spotlight. Charles took a final step forward, his presence oppressive, his gaze sharp. Well? Don't just stand there polishing the floor with your eyes. Are you going to fight, or are you just going to mop? William's grip tightened around the mop handle. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. In that moment, the gym, the students, and even Charles were unaware of the storm lying dormant in the man before them, a storm that had the power to shatter egos, rewrite expectations, and leave everyone speechless. William lowered his eyes to the floor, letting the mop glide across the hardwood like water over smooth stone. The motion was methodical, almost meditative. Each pass of the mop against the grain of the floor felt deliberate, a rhythm he alone controlled. The smell of cleaning solution clung to his sleeves, sharp and chemical, mixing with the faint musk of old sweat in the gym. He heard the laughter behind him, Charles's laugh, cutting and cruel, bouncing off the walls. The gym students shifted uneasily, their sneakers squeaking softly as they adjusted their stances, pretending they weren't watching. None of them could see what lay beneath William's calm exterior. A bead of sweat traced a line down his temple, but it wasn't from fear. It was anticipation, restraint, the tight coil of muscle and memory that had lain dormant for years. The mop handle rested lightly in his hands, but the way he adjusted his stance ever so slightly, the subtle flex of his wrists, betrayed control honed over decades. He thought of the first time he stepped into a real fight arena, 20 years ago, his fists shaking with a mix of excitement and fear, the crowd roaring like an ocean about to crash. He remembered James "Spar" Rodriguez, his best friend and partner, grinning, the smell of sweat and leather, the slap of gloves against flesh, the raw intensity of competition. And then he remembered the tragedy, the day everything changed. But those memories were like shadows at the edge of a forest, present, but never overwhelming. Today, he had one purpose: do his job quietly, keep his distance, and survive the storm of arrogance that Charles Bill was brewing. He glanced up subtly, eyes scanning the gym. Fluorescent lights flickered, reflecting in the mirrors that lined the walls. The reflection showed a man who appeared ordinary, almost invisible, a janitor in faded black pants and a threadbare uniform shirt. His posture was humble, shoulders slightly slumped, head bowed, mop in hand. To anyone watching, he was nothing more than a quiet presence. But inside, every nerve hummed. Every breath measured. Every muscle ready. The calm surface belied a depth of skill, experience, and discipline that no one, not even Charles, could guess. The students' whispers floated in the background. One murmured, "He's just a janitor." Another laughed nervously. Charles took a step closer, looming, and William felt the old instinct, the pulse that had once guided him through arenas packed with thousands. He ignored it. He focused instead on the mop, the floor, the sound of it moving in steady arcs, the faint squeak as it met the polished wood. He was unseen, underestimated, and yet in that invisibility, he held power. The calm before the storm, the eye of it, waiting for the right moment. And Charles had no idea that the very man he intended to humiliate carried the weight of decades, of glory, tragedy, and mastery hidden beneath a humble exterior. Charles circled slowly, eyes sharp, like a hawk inspecting prey. "Still standing there, janitor," he said, voice smooth, dripping condescension. "I can't tell if you're too scared to move or just slow. Either way, it's pathetic." William kept sweeping, his movements measured, almost languid, as though time itself slowed around him. Yet beneath the calm, muscles coiled like steel springs, every tendon tuned to react in an instant. He felt the familiar rhythm stir, the kind that only decades of discipline could instill. His mind wandered briefly to memories long buried. It was July 2002. Tokyo. A packed arena. The lights blinding, the crowd a roaring ocean. William, then known as Calm Storm, stood in the center of the ring, gloves up, heart pounding, watching his opponent as if reading a book. Every punch he threw, every feint, every step was calculated with precision. The roar of the crowd had fueled him, but he remembered the voices too, taunts, racist jeers, doubting eyes. He had learned then what the world often forgot: skill alone did not command respect. Character did. The memory cut sharper. That same year, in Rio, an accident. James "Spar" Rodriguez, best friend, training partner, almost a brother, collapsed mid-sparring. A miscalculated move, a split-second overextension, and suddenly everything changed. William had lost control under pressure, and in that instant, the arena erupted with chaos. He had walked away from the sport, undefeated, but haunted. That world of glory had cost him what mattered most. Now, decades later, those memories stirred quietly under his calm exterior. No one could see it, not Charles, not the students, not the whispers floating in the corners. And yet, every jab of arrogance from Charles pushed William closer to the edge of action, testing the very limits of his restraint. Charles leaned in, a finger tapping William's shoulder with forced familiarity, a sneer stretching across his face. "Don't make me ask twice. I want to see what you've got. Come on. Show me a move, or are janitors only good at mopping?" A ripple of tension ran through the room. One of the students shifted, uncertain, eyebrows knitting. Another exchanged a glance, unease written in their posture. And William. William's eyes flicked up, just enough to meet Charles's, and a flicker of steel passed through them, quick, subtle, gone before anyone else could notice. He didn't speak. He didn't react outwardly. But his mind catalogued every detail: Charles's stance, the angle of his shoulder, the weight distribution, the subtle twitch of his fingers. Muscle memory, instincts honed over 20 years, whispered quietly in his mind. He had been here before, in far bigger arenas, against far stronger opponents. The world had once cheered him, then cursed him. And now, in a small gym with 6 students as witnesses, the same tension simmered: arrogance versus quiet mastery, ignorance versus history. Charles laughed again, sharp and loud. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? I thought you were going to fight. Don't tell me you're—" And then, in that moment, William's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the mop handle. Not a weapon, not yet. Just a reminder of presence, of readiness, of control. The first spark of rising tension had been lit. The room held its breath. The gym had become a stage. Charles, the self-appointed king of it, and William, a quiet janitor with a hidden storm waiting beneath, coexisted in the same space. And every insult, every sneer, every microaggression from Charles was slowly building toward something that no one yet could predict. Emma Chun shifted uneasily on the edge of the mat, her purple belt tied neatly around her waist, sleeves rolled up to show faint bruises from earlier practice. She had been quiet until now, observing Charles's arrogance with growing discomfort. Each word he spat at William felt heavier, like stones dropped into a pond, sending ripples of unease across the students around him. Her eyes darted between Charles and William. Charles was all posture and bravado, striding like a man who believed the world existed to affirm him. William, in contrast, moved slowly, deliberately, as though he were weighing not only the physical space around him but the very energy Charles exuded. He didn't react to the insults. He didn't rise to the bait. And yet, Emma could feel the tension beneath his calm surface, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a taut string ready to snap. She swallowed and finally spoke, voice firm but trembling slightly. "Charles, this isn't necessary. He doesn't need to." "Quiet, rookie," Charles cut her off, snapping his gaze toward her. "This is my gym. My rules. You want to mop floors? Fine. Stand there and watch. But don't tell me how to run my class." Emma's jaw tightened. She had learned in sports psychology that sometimes standing up mattered more than staying silent, even when it was dangerous. Her heart pounded, a nervous rhythm against her chest, but she refused to look away. One of the students, a lanky young man with sweat streaked across his forehead, muttered under his breath, "She's right, this is over the line." Another, a smaller girl adjusting her gloves, nodded ever so slightly, the beginnings of a quiet consensus forming. Charles, sensing the subtle shift, leaned closer to William, the sneer widening. "You hear that? Even your little fans here think you're pathetic. Come on, janitor. Show me what you're made of. Or are you going to hide behind that mop forever?" William paused, hand resting lightly on the handle, not moving. But in that stillness, Emma noticed something. The way his shoulders aligned, how his fingers flexed, not like a man afraid, but a man calculating, ready. His eyes flicked toward Charles for the briefest of moments, sharp and precise. And then, just as quickly, they softened again, unreadable to anyone else. Emma's mind raced. She knew enough about martial arts to see that posture, that calm, that control. He wasn't ordinary. Yet he was choosing to remain silent, absorbing the provocation like water flowing around a rock. Another student whispered, barely audible, "Do you think he has a past? Something big?" Emma didn't respond, but a thought struck her. The way he carried himself, even as a janitor, suggested he had been somewhere else, someone else. Someone who had commanded respect before. And now, in this small gym, with Charles's arrogance pressing down, that presence was quietly reasserting itself, like a storm gathering strength beneath a calm sky. Charles, oblivious to the subtle observations, pressed further. "Still staring at me like that? I can see it in your eyes. You're scared. Admit it. just another loser hiding behind a mop. Emma's hand twitched, the urge to step in almost irresistible. But she held herself back, knowing William's silence was deliberate. Something was coming. Something that would change the room. And in that quiet anticipation, the students around them shifted again, sensing a tension far greater than what Charles's words could explain. William finally lifted his gaze just enough to meet Emma's. Not in acknowledgement, not in command, but in quiet reassurance. Stay calm. Wait. He was in control. And for the first time that morning, the students realized this wasn't going to be the simple, humiliating demonstration Charles imagined. William's grip on the mop tightened ever so slightly, the knuckles white beneath his worn gloves. The words from Charles, the sneers, the laughter, they all drifted around him like static, irritating yet distant. But beneath that calm exterior, memories surged like a river breaking through a dam. It was 1999, in Las Vegas, a packed arena. The air had smelled of sweat, hot leather, and antiseptic, mingling with the tension of a crowd hungry for spectacle. William had been, calm storm, then, undefeated, six-time world champion, a man whose very presence commanded attention. Every punch, every block, every step had been precise, a dance of balance, anticipation, and raw instinct honed over decades. And yet, the crowd had not always been kind. Racist jeers had punctuated his victories, comments from people who saw only the color of his skin, never the skill beneath. He remembered the day that had changed everything. June 12, 2005. Rio de Janeiro. James "Spear" Rodriguez, his closest friend and training partner, had been by his side as always. They had trained together for years, pushing each other to the edge of human capability. That day, during a sparring session, the pressure of expectation, the roar of the crowd, and the creeping weight of discrimination had collided. One miscalculated move, one split-second loss of control, and James had fallen. The memory struck him like a hammer against steel. The screams, the chaos, the sense of a world that demanded victory at any cost, it had been too much. William had left the ring that day undefeated in reputation but broken in spirit. He had walked away from the sport he loved, from the arena that had once cheered his name, and from the part of himself that had thrived on mastery. And now, in this small gym, years later, that same instinct stirred again. Charles Bill, arrogant and blind to nuance, mocked him, provoked him, dared him to act. Every muscle in William's body remembered the precision of a fight, the timing, the weight shifts, the subtle read of an opponent's intent. He could feel it now, the rhythm of combat flowing just beneath the surface, waiting. Yet restraint remained his ally. He had promised himself long ago never to let skill become a weapon for ego, never to let it hurt anyone again. The mop in his hands was no longer just a tool for cleaning, it was a reminder, a bridge between the world he had left behind and the one he now inhabited. Charles stepped closer, voice cutting again. "I'm running out of patience, Janitor. Don't make me drag you into this. I can see you want it, you just won't admit it." Pathetic. William inhaled slowly, the air tasting faintly of bleach and anticipation. He saw Charles clearly now, every stance, every twitch, every micro-expression, the arrogance, the expectation of dominance, the blind assumption that skill could only belong to a man like him. And in that observation, William found clarity. He would not react out of fear. He would not react out of anger. But when the time came, he would act with precision, with control, with the quiet authority that had once defined him as calm storm. Emma, standing to the side, felt the shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. Something was stirring beneath William's quiet surface, a history, a presence, a mastery that even the students around them could not yet perceive. And in that tension, the first true spark of inevitable confrontation flickered, an unspoken promise that Charles's arrogance might meet the reality it had so ignorantly challenged. William's thoughts drifted briefly again to James, to those lost years, to the promise he had made, never let skill become arrogance again. And yet, here, in this moment, he allowed himself one private acknowledgement, a small, controlled readiness. He was watching, calculating, waiting. The storm beneath the calm was awake. Charles leaned in even closer, the air around him thick with arrogance. Still staring at me like you're some kind of sage, janitor? His voice was sharp, deliberate, designed to provoke. I've got 6 students watching. They all know who the real fighters are. You're just cleaning. That's it. Just a mop and some delusions of grandeur. William's eyes flicked upward for the briefest moment, meeting Charles's gaze with a quiet intensity that made the other man pause without realizing it. The words flowed over him, but they no longer penetrated the core of his being. He felt the familiar hum of controlled awareness beneath his skin, the same instinct that had guided him through championship arenas and life-or-death sparring sessions. Every twitch of Charles's fingers, every subtle weight shift in his stance, was catalogued. Is that a nod? Charles sneered, leaning even closer. You think you've got something to say? Or are you just too scared to admit you know you can't compete with me? He laughed, a sound designed to humiliate, to assert dominance. Come on. Just one move. Show me, janitor. Just one move. William exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, letting the air pass through him as though releasing tension he had never let show. He felt the old conflict, the familiar pull of instinct versus restraint. Every fiber of his being remembered the arenas, the crowds, the roars of victory, and the pain of loss, the accident that had ended James Rodriguez's life and changed his own forever. Another student whispered, uncertain, he's not even moving, is he going to fight? Emma's voice, quiet but firm, broke through the tension. Charles, you're pushing too far. He doesn't need to prove anything to you. Charles's gaze flicked toward her, annoyed but dismissive. Cute. A little hero complex from the rookie. Maybe you should focus on your own training instead of worrying about a janitor. He stepped directly in front of William now, blocking the path, smirk widening. You know what? I'll make it simple. One spar. Right here. Right now. Or admit to everyone that all you do is mop floors. The students tensed, a collective intake of breath filling the room. Some shifted on their feet, unable to look away. The subtle energy in the gym changed, becoming almost electric, a taut wire stretching toward a breaking point. William's mind briefly replayed the countless times he had been underestimated, dismissed, mocked by those who believed appearance or title defined ability. The words Charles spat were familiar echoes of that arrogance. And now, after years of quiet labor, of keeping his skills hidden, of walking a path away from glory to avoid harm, the question was no longer if he could respond, it was how. He didn't move, didn't speak. He let Charles overextend, the arrogance pressing into the space around him. He could feel the anticipation of the witnesses, the students, Emma, the subtle tension that filled the air, thick and suffocating. Every eye was fixed on him, unknowingly waiting for a storm that he alone could control. Charles, sensing the hesitation, pushed further. What's the matter? Afraid? Or are you just so used to hiding behind that mop that you've forgotten how to fight? William's thumb brushed along the mop handle, the motion barely noticeable. A surge of calm energy ran through him, like water flowing around a rock, controlled, deliberate, inevitable. He had chosen restraint for decades, but now, the provocation had reached its limit. He wasn't acting out of anger. He wasn't acting out of pride. He was waiting for the right moment to act, with precision, with dignity, with authority. And the room, though unaware, sensed it. A quiet, electric shift, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The tipping point was near. The calm before the storm. The gym had gone quiet, though the 6 students around them hardly realized it. Charles's smirk faltered just slightly, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. William straightened, slowly, deliberately. The mop still rested in his hands, but it was no longer just a cleaning tool, it was a symbol of control, of patience, of measured presence. All right, William said, his voice low, calm, but carrying an unmistakable authority. I'll spar. But only if you apologize afterward, for your words, for your arrogance. The room froze. Charles's eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and irritation crossing his face. "Excuse me," he said, voice rising. You're telling me what to do?" "Yes," William replied evenly, letting the calm in his tone cut through the tension like a blade. "Apologize first. Respect goes both ways." Charles hesitated, glancing at the students. Some of them were shifting nervously, sensing that this was no ordinary sparring match. Finally, with a tight grin and a muttered, "Fine, fine," Charles mumbled a reluctant apology, the words forced but audible. William nodded once, satisfied. He set the mop aside. The motion was deliberate, precise, each step measured, like a ritual that the room wasn't meant to understand yet. Charles squared himself, muscles coiled, ready to assert dominance. He lunged forward with a jab, confident that William's silence was a sign of weakness. William moved. And it was like watching water flow around a rock. He didn't flinch, didn't tense unnecessarily. He simply shifted, a subtle pivot, and the jab slid past him harmlessly. Another strike followed, a kick aimed at his side. William's body twisted just enough, weight shifting perfectly, and the kick met nothing but air. Charles's frustration began to bubble, the arrogance faltering as his strikes failed again and again. William's movements were precise, effortless, a perfect combination of timing, distance, and control. A simple palm strike, executed with surgical accuracy, sent Charles stumbling backward, unbalanced, before he even realized the impact. The students gasped. Emma's eyes widened. Every whisper of doubt, every murmur of disbelief, filled the room. This man they had underestimated, this quiet, humble janitor, was a master, a legend hidden in plain sight. William remained calm, breathing measured, muscles relaxed yet coiled. He didn't strike again. He didn't need to. His demonstration was enough. Every dodge, every block, every perfectly timed movement was a statement. He was not what Charles thought, nor what the students had assumed. Charles, chest heaving, eyes wide with shock and humiliation, stumbled to a halt. "What? How?" he stammered, words failing him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning, uncomfortable realization. He had misjudged the man before him. Emma stepped forward, heart pounding, phone in hand. She needed to know, needed to confirm what she already suspected. And in the tense silence, William's gaze met hers briefly, a quiet acknowledgement of the storm he had restrained for so long. The room held its breath. The first wave of revelation had begun. Charles's superiority had been shattered not through brute force, but through skill, patience, and the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades perfecting himself, then choosing to hide. And in that moment, every witness understood, they had underestimated him at their peril. Emma's hands shook slightly as she pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. She typed quickly, searching for the name that had already begun to circulate in her mind, William Washington. Calm storm. The results came up instantly, and what she read made her catch her breath. "Wait, this can't be," she whispered under her breath. She read aloud, her voice barely above a murmur but carrying across the silent gym. William Washington, a.k.a. Calm Storm. 6-time world mixed martial arts champion. Retired undefeated after a 22-year career, retired at age 29 after a tragic accident during sparring that killed his best friend, James Rodriguez. The room shifted, the air heavy with disbelief. The students' eyes went wide, even Charles took a step back, stumbling over his own pride as the weight of what he had just witnessed began to sink in. Emma continued, reading the online profiles, the old fight footage, interviews long archived but still accessible. Reputation for flawless technique, unmatched timing, extraordinary fight IQ, multiple international titles, undefeated. Charles's jaw tightened. The color drained slightly from his face. Every arrogant word he had spat at William, every smirk, every dismissive gesture, now hovered in the room like shameful ghosts. He had mocked a legend without knowing it, challenged a master disguised as a janitor. The students murmured among themselves. He's the Calm Storm," one asked incredulously. "All this time, janitor?" William stood still, calm and collected, mop set aside but still in easy reach if needed. He didn't speak yet. Let the revelation settle. Let the truth sink in. Let Charles face the full weight of his own arrogance. Charles finally swallowed, eyes darting nervously between William and the phone in Emma's hands. You're calm Storm? The champion? His voice cracked, disbelief evident. The words he had used to demean William, to provoke, now rang hollow in the room. William's gaze met Charles's, steady, controlled, unflinching. There was no malice, no gloating, only quiet authority. He had been underestimated, judged for his appearance, his job, his silence. Now the illusion had shattered. Respect had to be earned, and Charles had learned, painfully, that arrogance and privilege were no substitute. Emma lowered the phone slowly, her eyes on William. I can't believe it. All this time," her voice trailed off. She understood, finally, the magnitude of what she had witnessed, the depth of restraint, the mastery, the quiet dignity that Charles had failed to recognize. The gym felt different now. Lighter, yet charged. Every eye in the room lingered on William, absorbing the truth, reckoning with the reality that the humble janitor before them was no ordinary man. And in that moment, Charles realized that the lesson he had so carelessly provoked was now fully unavoidable. Charles stood frozen, chest rising and falling, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and shame. He had built himself on confidence, on the illusion of superiority, on the assumption that appearances and titles were all that mattered. Now, that illusion had crumbled around him. William stepped forward, calm and deliberate, each movement measured like a master demonstrating control. "Charles," he said, voice steady, resonant, carrying authority without aggression, "let me make something very clear. Respect is not granted because of a belt, a title, or the number of eyes watching you. Respect is earned through character, humility, and how you treat those around you." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Charles opened his mouth, then closed it again. His arrogance had no words to defend itself. "You mocked me, provoked me, and humiliated someone you assumed was beneath you," William continued. "Do you see now what that reveals? Not about me, but about you. Arrogance doesn't prove skill. Disrespect doesn't prove dominance. Judging someone by their appearance only exposes the flaws in your own character." Charles's hands twitched at his sides. His jaw clenched. Finally, his voice emerged, forced, hesitant. I'm sorry," he muttered, barely audible, yet it was enough. Not a grand apology, not theatrical, but an acknowledgement. The first step toward understanding, the first crack in the armor of his ego. William nodded once, just slightly. Then he turned, fluidly, into a slow demonstration, not an attack, but a lesson in precision and control. He moved through a series of blocks, dodges, and redirections, each subtle motion a reminder of mastery restrained by discipline. Every strike he deflected, every step he anticipated, was a silent statement: skill without humility is hollow, mastery without integrity is meaningless. The students watched, awestruck. Their earlier admiration for Charles was replaced by wonder and respect for William. Emma, standing nearby, felt a surge of understanding. She had witnessed courage not in confrontation alone, but in restraint, in the deliberate choice to teach through action rather than rage. Charles swallowed hard, the weight of embarrassment pressing down on him, but also something heavier: realization. He had misjudged the janitor. He had misjudged humanity. And in that forced humility, there was the beginning of growth, the spark of a lesson learned the hard way. William stepped back, lowering his hands. "Let this be a reminder," he said, voice calm but firm, "that your worth is not measured by what you can dominate, but by how you treat others. True greatness comes from character, not titles." The gym remained quiet for a long moment, everyone absorbing the gravity of the words, the authority of the lesson. Charles averted his gaze, internalizing the weight of his own arrogance, while Emma felt a shift within herself, a renewed understanding of courage, empathy, and the power of quiet strength. The tension in the gym slowly began to ease, though the air remained thick with the residue of what had just transpired. The students shifted, eyes wide, whispering quietly among themselves. For the first time, they weren't focused on Charles's demonstrations or bravado, they were focused on William, absorbing the calm authority and restraint that had carried him through the confrontation. Emma took a slow breath, her mind racing. She had come into the gym that morning expecting routine, a normal practice session, a chance to observe technique and learn. Instead, she had witnessed something far greater: courage through patience, mastery tempered by restraint, and the quiet assertion of dignity against arrogance. She glanced at William, who now stood motionless, mop at his side, posture relaxed but alert. His eyes met hers briefly, a small acknowledgement passing between them. She realized, suddenly, that true strength didn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it waited. Sometimes, it revealed itself only when the moment demanded. The students began to gather themselves, approaching cautiously, curiosity and newfound respect in their expressions. One of them asked, hesitantly, "Sir, will you teach us?" William gave a slight nod, the smallest of gestures, and in that moment, the dynamic in the room shifted completely. He was no longer invisible, no longer underestimated. His quiet authority had established a new hierarchy, not of fear, but of respect. Emma felt a change within herself as well. She realized that standing up to injustice wasn't just about speaking, it was about observing, understanding, and knowing when to support those whose strength might not be visible at first glance. She had learned the power of discernment, the courage of empathy, and the importance of recognizing greatness in unexpected forms. Charles, meanwhile, lingered near the back, his face tight with humility he had never known before. The students' gazes flicked toward him occasionally, reminders of the arrogance he had displayed and the lesson he had received. He cleared his throat, voice quiet, almost reluctant. I see now. I have much to learn." The word sounded strange coming from him, but the effort was real. And in that moment, the gym was transformed. The confrontation had ended, not with humiliation alone, nor with a show of brute strength, but with understanding, reflection, and growth. William remained calm, a quiet anchor amid the ripples of change. Emma had grown braver, more aware. The students had learned a lesson they would carry far beyond the gym floor. Even Charles had been forced, at least in part, to confront the limits of arrogance and the value of humility. The room was no longer merely a training space. It had become a classroom for character, a place where respect, restraint, and quiet mastery were honored above titles and appearances. And in that shift, every person present understood, in their own way, the true meaning of greatness. 3 months later, the gym was almost unrecognizable. The tension that had once hung in the air like storm clouds had been replaced by a quiet sense of respect and purpose. William, no longer just the janitor, now taught classes that combined technique with philosophy. His lessons extended beyond punches and kicks, focusing on discipline, humility, and the kind of character that could not be measured by belts or titles. Emma moved through the gym with newfound confidence, assisting William and guiding students not just in technique but in observing character, patience, and self-control. She had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated that day, understanding that courage was sometimes silent, sometimes hidden, and sometimes revealed only in moments of profound restraint. The students listened intently, their eyes sharp, their movements precise, their respect earned rather than demanded. Charles, on the other hand, was noticeably absent from the main classes. Footage of the confrontation had gone viral, the story spreading across social media and martial arts forums. The gym that once boasted Charles's name had lost nearly half its students, leaving him teaching at a smaller location, his arrogance tempered by public scrutiny and forced humility. William observed it all quietly, offering guidance when needed but never gloating. He had proven a point without malice, teaching a lesson without unnecessary violence. Respect, he understood, was not about dominance but about integrity. It was not about appearance or position, but about how one treated others when no one was watching, or when everyone was. Emma caught his eye one afternoon as they demonstrated a defensive sequence to a small group of students. She smiled, a quiet acknowledgement between them. "I understand now," she said softly. "It's not about proving yourself to anyone, it's about who you are when you're tested. William nodded. Exactly, he replied, voice calm, steady, carrying the weight of experience without arrogance. Titles don't teach you that. Only life does. As the sun streamed through the gym's high windows, catching the dust motes in its golden light, the scene felt almost serene. But beneath that serenity lay a truth. The world had been reminded that greatness can be found in the most unassuming places, that humility and character outshine arrogance, and that judging people by appearances or profession often reveals more about the observer than the observed. Charles, teaching in his smaller gym, moved with a quiet restraint he had never known before. He no longer sought admiration, he sought understanding. And while his journey was far from complete, the first steps had been taken. William, standing amidst students who had once whispered doubts about him, smiled faintly to himself. The mop he had once carried as a symbol of humility now seemed almost symbolic of the bridge he had built, between past and present, arrogance and respect, appearance and reality. And in that quiet moment, the story settled into its lasting truth. Real greatness comes not from belts, titles, or recognition, but from the character one carries, the respect one gives, and the humility one demonstrates. The world could never know the full measure of someone like William Calm Storm Washington, but those who had witnessed it, even briefly, would never forget. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.